All right. Hello, everyone. We are moving on to our next topic, 1.2 Developments in Dar es Salaam from 1200 to 1450. We're going to focus on how systems of belief and practices impact society, look at the causes and effects of the rise of the Islamic states over time, and then explain the effects of the intellectual innovation that we're going to see under the rise and spread of Islam. In order to properly do this, though, we have to take a step back and look at the rise of Judaism and Christianity before we can touch on Islam. So, when we're taking a look at Israel, here are some things that we know. The Israelites were nomadic herders as well as caravan drivers, and eventually they form a religion that focuses on a desert god. This will eventually evolve into a very complex monotheistic religion. And it is one of the first monotheistic religions of its kind. What historians are not sure of is what came first, Zoroastrianism or Judaism. You'll notice some overlapping trends in both of these religions, as well as Zoroastrianism and Christianity. The Hebrew holy text dates back to about 700 BCE, and the current version dates to about 500 BCE. The historical accuracy of of the Hebrew Bible, also known as the Torah, has been greatly debated. Historians have also noticed that there are some overlapping stories. The flood story, Noah's Ark, is also very similar to the Epic of Gilgamesh. In the Rig Veda, there is also a flood story. And what we also know is that around this time, there was a flood. It destroyed the region of Mesopotamia, which at this time was the known world. And that has actually been proven by layers of sediment. So the odds are is that a great flood did occur. A great flood did destroy civilization as people knew it. As you guys know, in Mesopotamia, the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers flooded very violently and very unpredictably. When we're looking at the foundations of Judaism, the Hebrews believed that their prophets could talk directly to God. We're looking at the kingdom of Israel as well as Abraham's journey to get there. Hebrews believe that God chose Abraham to be their leader and that he spoke directly to him. Abraham promised that all his descendants would follow this religion, and he told his people they were being tested by God. Abraham himself was tested and asked to sacrifice his own son, Isaac. The Hebrew Bible also recounts the exodus of Hebrews out of Egypt. But one thing that we're going to be looking at and referring to is the word aperu, which sounds similar to Hebrew. And one of the things that historians also debate is the Exodus itself. And there's no evidence of a single migration out of Egypt by a single group of people. However, there is evidence of large-scale construction under Ramses II and Thesos I that would actually tie into the same account of a large number of people being enslaved. As you guys know, these pyramids that were built in Egypt were huge. It would take a great labor force, and that's also an excellent way to show your political authority. What better way to prove to your people that you have absolute authority, such as Ramses II, by constructing and ordering a giant pyramid to be built? And again, what we're seeing is that word aperu. Aperu was a word that represented people who were not native to Egypt, and that could be Hebrews, but that could also be people who were criminals and brought in to Egypt to serve their sentence. That could be other ethnic groups of people who were enslaved by the Egyptians. We do know that Egyptian society included slaves. So when the kingdom of Israel is established, first by Abraham and then his descendants, including Solomon, unfortunately, the kingdom divides in half. Israel would remain in the north, but the kingdom of Judah would form in the south. And during this time, other empires are rising up, the Assyrian Empire and the Babylonian Empire. And these empires both attack Israel and Judah, and Israel and Judah fall. So both emperors within Assyria and the Babylonian Empire, specifically the Babylonian monarch Nebuchadnezzar, begin what's called the Jewish diasporas. And essentially, what they begin doing is deporting a large number of Jewish elites as well as craftsmen throughout their empire. And this would be the beginning of a series of these diasporas. And part of the reason this was done is that the Jews had a monotheistic religion that was different than the Babylonians, that was different than the Assyrians, and they were not willing to convert. Because of that, they isolated themselves. They formed a very strong sense of community and culture, and they were viewed as a threat to other empires. You will see continued Jewish diasporas under the Neo-Assyrian Empire and then under the Roman Empire. These diasporas had a very interesting effect. Though they were meant to weaken and to break up the Jewish faith, it actually strengthened it. And what you'll see happening is a stronger commitment to monotheism, the establishment of strict dietary rules, and then a focus on the Sabbath. Under the Roman Empire, Jews are often persecuted, and it's in the Roman Empire that you'll see the rise of Christianity. Julius Caesar, you probably know him from the Roman Republic, is assassinated. Et tu, Brutus? But his grandnephew, Octavian, later known as Augustus, will take power in 31 BCE. And Augustus forms a paid civil service. He's treated as a god after his death, and he's also what you would call a military dictator. He is a major source of law. But Christianity will begin to rise up. Now, what you have to know is that most Romans were polytheistic, and public cults of these gods were supported by tax dollars. So it's very important that people believe so these cults can exist. Because, guys, remember, public cults, those are priests and priestesses. They're the upper class. You want to stay the upper class, you got to have that tax money. So Jews were persecuted within the Roman Empire. And many Jews believed that a Messiah figure would bring salvation and end their persecution. And then arriving on the scene is Jesus. And Jesus is a carpenter by trade, and he begins preaching. He's a rabbi, and he's trying to reform Jewish religious practices. He's trying to get people to observe the ways it used to be. Jesus began preaching in 28 or 29 CE, and his cousin John the Baptist baptized him in 26 CE. He wanted to reform the civil and social abuses, but he was viewed as kind of a troublemaker or a rebel rouser, if you will. And what happens is he goes into a temple and he overturns a table that's being run by a banker, because what was happening is it was Saturday, it was the Sabbath, and people were conducting business in the temple. And he says something along the lines of, "You will not conduct business on the Sabbath in my Father's house." Well, this gets him arrested. The Jewish authorities turn him over to the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate, and Jesus is crucified. 3 days after his death, his followers say that he rose from the dead. Some of his female disciples found his tomb empty. And thus, this is the birth of Christianity. Early Christians had to organize a new church after the death of Jesus. And in 38 CE, a very wealthy and educated disciple named Paul from Taurus converted and began trying to convert others to follow the teachings of Jesus. And what Paul found was that non-Jews were much more receptive to the teachings of Jesus than Jews were. And the Roman Empire was so cosmopolitan by nature. There were roads that were paved everywhere. It was very easy to travel throughout. It was very easy to find people to convert. After Paul dies, another follower, Peter, also begins converting, and he begins leading a Christian community. So what we have here is an actual reconstruction using some DNA, and then basically this is what historians believe that Jesus looked like. And these are some of the earliest images of Jesus. But here are some other images, because what's going to happen is as Christianity spreads, the followers want to adopt Jesus as one of their own. This image here is from a Coptic church in Egypt, and it actually is the earliest known image of Jesus and his disciples. I posted this image up because this painting actually hung in my grandmother's house. Um, she was a very devout Catholic, and anytime I did something wrong, she would look at me and say, "He saw that, Jen. Anything you want to tell me?" This is actually the image that I grew up with. But what you'll notice is a lot of cultures will take something that is not native to their land and change it to adopt it as their own. And we're going to talk more about that in class and why people do that. This is a fresco. It's Behold the Man. It's in a sanctuary in Spain, painted in 1930. And on the right is why you don't hire people who have no credentials to restore classical pieces of art. A little humor for us. Why Christianity was so appealing is that it was an egalitarian faith. It was very attractive to the poor, to women, and slaves because they were treated with quite a bit of respect. And by the late 3rd century, Christians were becoming a very sizable minority in the Roman Empire, but they were very frequently persecuted. They were not allowed to marry, and this is where you have people like St. Valentine. St. Valentine, who married Christians and then was executed for doing so. That's what we celebrate on Valentine's Day, y'all. The expansion of Christianity within the Roman Empire came at a time where Romans were becoming very dissatisfied with the traditional religion, and it also ties into quite a bit of chaos that was happening in the Roman Empire. External invasions by Germanic tribesmen being a big one, increasing of taxes. This is where you also see the formation of a number of cults as well as universal creeds. All good things, though, must come to an end. And in 476, Rome split in half, guys. There were a lot of signs that things weren't going well. The actual capital of Rome moved from Rome to Constantinople. Emperor Constantine renamed the city of Byzantium, Constantinople, meaning city of Constantine. And when he left and he took his capital with him, the western half of the Roman Empire collapsed, leaving the eastern half to be known as the Byzantine Empire. What we need to take from the Byzantine Empire is that these people considered themselves to be Romans. Justinian is perhaps the greatest known emperor of the Byzantine Empire, as well as his wife Theodora. The Byzantine Empire will reach its greatest size under Justinian, and he wanted to rebuild the Roman Empire, so he sought to reclaim lost territory. But his wife Theodora was very essential to his reign. And at one point, when Justinian is in a battle fighting to reclaim lost territory, things aren't going well and he wants to retreat. And essentially, Theodora looks at him and tells him, "Yeah, no. Get out there, keep fighting, or I'm leaving you." And Justinian keeps fighting. I'm sure she used some very choice words with this. He keeps fighting, and they actually win the battle. He temporarily regained North Africa, Italy, and southern Spain. After this, his wife Theodora had considerable power. Under Justinian, Constantinople becomes a thriving city once again, and Justinian, to show not only his devotion to Christianity, but also his power, commissions the building of the Hagia Sophia, as well as introduces a law code. Now, this is the Hagia Sophia. It is a Greek a Greek Orthodox church that in 1453 was conquered by the Ottoman Empire. However, there is a rule in Islam that temples, churches, any kind of holy building belonging to a member of a like faith, people of the book is the phrase that we're going to use, are not to be destroyed. Rather, they're repurposed. And under Sultan Mehmed II, this church was converted into a mosque. And if you look on the inside, there are actually still frescoes of Jesus and his disciples on the ceiling. Under the Byzantine, you see quite a bit of cultural achievements, specifically with art. Mosaics and frescoes, as well as gold leaf painting, are some very iconic achievements. We also see the introduction of Cyrillic script by missionaries and brothers, Cyril and Methodius. Now, what we know is the Byzantine continued a lot of late Roman ideas, specifically roads, taxes, military structure. Again, they called themselves Romans, and they forbid their people to follow barbaric customs, aka Germanic customs, because the Germans are the ones that destroyed the western half of the empire, which essentially meant they couldn't wear boots or pants or clothing made of animal skins, and they couldn't have long hair. The emperor ruled the state. The patriarch ruled the Greek Orthodox Church. This is very different than what is happening in Western Europe. We're going to focus on the Holy Roman Empire. So Western Europe, you have the Carolingian Empire, but the one we need to look at is the Holy Roman Empire. It wasn't holy and it wasn't Roman. It is a loose confederation of Germanic states that band together. In December, so Christmas Day of 800, Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne as the first emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. And the popes were doing this. They're crowning the emperor because they want to combine the religious power with political power. And this is not going to go well. The Holy Roman Empire, guys, remember, it is that loose coalition of teeny little German kingdoms run by German princes. What ends up happening is this great schism, this divide between Orthodox Christians, so Orthodox Greeks, and Roman Catholics. And what's going to happen is the leading figures, so the Caesar Papism and the Pope, do not get along because they disagree greatly on how tradition should run. And the Great Schism is essentially these two men excommunicating each other from their respective faiths. So the Pope is saying, I excommunicate you. Well, it doesn't really matter because they don't belong to the same faith. And essentially what you're looking at, you'll see Orthodox Christianity spreading in Eastern Europe. The most important city is Constantinople. The language is Greek. And the most important holiday is Easter. In the Roman Catholic Church, it's Western Europe. They speak Latin. They use icons. Priests have to remain celibate. Unlike in Orthodox Christianity, they can marry. The most important holiday is Christmas. But they also disagreed on the relative importance of faith and reason, the jurisdiction of the Bishop of Rome versus the See of Constantinople, and the nature of the Trinity itself. Guys, these are some pretty important issues that are to be disagreed on. That's why they split. And what's going to happen is these two churches do not get along, but they will reunite under the Crusades. And essentially, it's each other saying, well, you're the wrong kind of Christian, but you're still Christian, so we can forget our differences for a little while. That's going to lead us into the rise of Islam. We're going to come back to the Crusades later. But I want you to have a full understanding of why these two religions, or three, if you will, are going to go to battle against each other and who actually starts the Crusades and who the Crusades matter most to. We're going to stop here for now, but our second podcast is going to pick up with the rise and spread of Islam. So send me an email if you have any questions. Otherwise, have a great night, y'all.